Back from recess, I'd like to bring the meeting back to order. We are now on agenda item 17A for possible action, discussion and possible action regarding the appointment of 4 members to the Carson City Cultural and Tourism Authority, 2 as representatives for motel hotel operators, 1 as a representative for other commercial interests, and 1 as a citizen at-large representative, each for a 2-year term expiring in July 2022. So we have in front of us now, Steve. Great, thank you. Steve, if you have not been through this process before, each one of us will ask you a question. We'll give you a chance to introduce yourself, tell us why you want to apply for this position, and then each one of us will ask you a question, which will be the same question that we ask every applicant. So it's an apples to apples interview, okay? At the end of your interview, you're welcome to stick around until we go through the process of picking out who's going to be appointed. So go ahead and let us know a little bit about yourself and why you applied for this position.
Great, okay, I'm Steve Kim, I'm the general manager at the My Place Hotel up in North Carson.
Turn the mic on there, Steve.
Really, I just like to talk loud. At any rate, I'm Steve Kim, and I'm the general manager of the My Place Hotel in North Carson. I moved here last Memorial Day to finish up the build, and we opened up last September. And I really like the area, big fan of it. I'm not from here originally. Prior to this, I'd been living in South Dakota. Prior to that, I'd been living in Phoenix. Came up here, and I just really like it. And everywhere that I've ever been, I've always vested myself in the community. I like to be a part of it. I like to give back and do the best I can. Some of the things that I've been doing here in Carson besides running the hotel, coaching a couple youth sports teams, everyone that I've had a chance to get to know, regular person, business owner, whoever it might be, has just been great, very pleasant. Big fan of the community and want to do what I can to help it grow. So that's probably the reason for my application in short.
Thank you. John, you want to start off today?
Sure. Thanks for the question, Steve.
You're welcome.
Prior to COVID-19, Carson City tourism was on pace. Better use this, hadn't I? Prior to COVID-19, Carson City tourism was on pace to have its best year in terms of direct visitor spending. As you're looking to join the CTA board at such a critical juncture in terms of tourism and the foreseeable future of tourism, what do you see as the priorities for Visit Carson City to come out on the other side of the pandemic with a healthy, robust, but most importantly, sustainable and diverse tourism economy?
I guess the answer for me would be just the continued education. And I think I speak from a unique perspective that I'd heard of Carson City, obviously, prior to moving here. I knew my history books, I knew my state capitals, but I'd never been. And it's a diamond in the rough. It's really unique. I really like it. There are a lot of spectacular things about it. I think just educating people on what we have to offer. Obviously, right up the road is the city, and down the other way there's a lake, and I think that Carson's right in the middle, and I can only speak for the My Place, but we've been extremely fortunate, and we've been putting out the best numbers we've had month over month for the last 3 months since we opened. And I think it all comes back to just customer service and providing a quality product at a fair price, and that would be what I would push.
Thank you.
Casey?
Steve, thanks for putting it. Mind if I call you Steve? Is that
No,
okay?
yeah, that's perfect. Thank you.
Thanks for putting your name in and putting yourself out there.
You're welcome.
I have a question that's equally as long as John's. I apologize. So room taxes are currently funding an arts and cultural director position in Carson. The tax for this position ends in May of 2021. The individual working in the role has been an employee of both the CTA and the city at different times. The position has moved back and forth. The position's vacant right now, and so we have an opportunity for this employee to work at either location. So I'd like to know where you think the arts and cultural director should be employed and why? And then secondarily, do you think the position should be funded through room taxes or through some other means?
Well, I guess I don't have a lot of background or experience. I don't really know the politics behind it. To me, I guess the answer would be to continue to fund it as it was funded previously unless those funds aren't available. and search for an alternative. I guess I don't really, I understand the question, but I don't understand the position, the history of the position and what they do. I guess if all of their work is done for, fine arts and I'm assuming productions that the city is putting forward, that's obviously going to be people from out of town hopefully coming to attend, which is going to pull money in taxes from the hotels. So I think that it should be equally supported.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Hi, Steve. Thank you so much for applying.
You're welcome.
I'll try to do one that's really brief, but you can make it all that you want it to be. If you thought that COVID was going to continue for the next year, what's the one ad campaign you would do to get visitors to come to Carson City?
I guess again, I'd go back to just selling a safer, cleaner, quieter place and an opportunity to maybe escape. A lot of that answer to my question would depend upon what the stats might be, but in a hypothetical situation where there's no COVID here in Carson, that would be my push. And I think the risk of being infected in Carson may or may not be significantly lower than many of the areas which people are coming from. I can only speak for our property, but we get a significant amount of people from the Bay Area, and oftentimes they just want out of that rat race. So I think that I would try to push that maybe. But on the other hand, I mean, I'm not trying to be ambiguous, but I don't know because I have some contacts over there, but I don't know who I'd try to run down in San Jose or San Francisco to convince them that they need to come to Carson City. So I think a lot of the work would have to be done in places, that are closer to us. So that would probably be the big push.
Steve, my question for you is, you are familiar with the South Carson project, rebuilding the road, putting in a
Yes.
multi-use path. So that, part of that project is a roundabout at Stewart Street and South Carson Street,
Correct.
which will be the gateway to downtown. And part of that roundabout is a public art venue. So give me your thoughts on what you would envision for the art, for the gateway to our downtown, and how would you fund it?
Well, first, I would envision something that has to do with the heritage of the area, without question for me. I don't know what particularly that would be, but I suppose there'd be a plethora of things brought to the table, but I think it'd have to have something to do with the heritage of the city and downtown. And as far as funding, honestly, I don't know how to answer that question, so I don't want to answer it, and I have no idea.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any last comments?
No.
Great. Well, like I said, you're welcome to stick around, either in here in one of the chairs or out in the lobby until we get through all the interviews and make the appointment.
Okay, I
It's up to
appreciate your
you.
time.
All right.
I thought I was going to come here and you're going to lob me a bunch of softballs, but.
That comes after 5.
I'll hang around. I've got to be smart. 2:15, but I'll hang around all that. Okay, I'm going to grab my slip.
Who's next up?
Benjamin Miller. Just for the record, Elizabeth O'Leary and Mike Riggs pulled their applications.
It's a great shirt. Thank you. Welcome, Benjamin. The green light is on? Perfect. Great. So Benjamin, the way this works is that we're going to give yourself an opportunity to tell us about yourself and why you're applying for this position. Then each member will ask you a question, which is the same question that every applicant gets. And then we'll give you an opportunity to wrap up with some final comments. So go ahead and give us some information about yourself and why you applied for this position.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Benjamin Miller. I am 21 years old, currently studying graphic design and political science at Western Nevada College. Currently taking a break to sort of find myself, explore different options in terms of careers and just overall hobbies and interests that I really want to get into. I've always had a passion for politics. However, it it only recently started becoming a short-term goal of mine to get involved more with Carson City. Since my family moved here in around 2004, I have taken part in several communities around the city, such as the Brewery Arts Center, St. Jude's Children's Hospital, and other charity organizations that I don't really care to name too many. Kinderlines, there's also certain churches that I've made several donations to, non-monetary, of course, more like helping out in my spare time. But I do take a lot of pride in it. The reason why I applied for this committee is I think that the cultural side of Carson City just can't be beat. I've visited, been to several other parts of Nevada, and in my opinion, they're just subpar to what we've got going on here. The railroads, the museum, the Brewery Arts Center, several art exhibitions, the Nevada Day Parade, they just all sort of conglomerate into what makes, I think, Nevada beautiful, sets us apart from Vegas and other parts. Really gives us an identity to set ourselves apart from the rest of the country, which I take a lot of pride in. I'm very proud of of being raised in this setting. I'm from LA originally, but not too many memories, as you could probably imagine. It's a very big city. It's really hard to make a difference in such a dense population. Now, that's not to say that Carson City isn't too dense. It's a relatively low population these days, around 55,000, I believe. So that gives people like me, a chance to really make a difference in our community, help bring people together in a way, help young students sort of find a role that they can really attach themselves to, so that way they're not so prone to getting involved in other things that families wouldn't want them to get involved in, like taking part in sports or after school activities, volunteer work. Those things all just combine, really help make a young student's life much more interesting, and really help them along the path that I believe leads to great success, whether that be in politics, engineering, landscaping, whatever they might want to contribute to the city. I think it's a very beautiful thing.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Stacy, you want to start?
Ben, thanks for your time and putting in for this. So currently, room taxes, 1% room tax funds an arts and cultural director position in the city. That tax sunsets, so it ends in May of 2021. The person working in this job has been both an employee of the city and of the Convention and Tourism Authority at different times. The position's vacant now, so we have an opportunity to have this employee work at either location. So let me know what you think about where the position should be located as a city employee or as a CTA employee, and why you feel that way. And then I'd also like to know if you think the position should continue to be funded through room tax revenue or from some other source.
Well, during my time working with student government over at Western Nevada College, I found that allocating people for specific jobs really benefits, because it definitely helps to have one person dedicated to something, not so much moving around from place to place, but just solely focusing on that. And what was that you said earlier about room tax? Can you elaborate just a little bit more on that?
Well, yeah, room tax funds this position. So the position could either be an employee of the city or an employee of the Convention and Tourism Authority. It wouldn't move, and that's what I'm looking to you for, to see what your thought is on where the Arts and Cultural Director should be.
Of course. I believe that it would be most beneficial to have them work directly for the city, because having a face for the people to sort of look to and hold accountable in certain scenarios, I think it puts a lot more weight on the position. It makes people have a lot more pride in their work when they know that they're held more responsible, I believe.
Okay, thank you.
Good afternoon. Okay. So let's assume that COVID's going to be here for another year or so. And so tell me what the one pitch you think you could make to get people to come visit Carson City under those conditions.
Now, when you say 1 year, do you mean a year starting from today or a year starting from, yeah, okay. So we're assuming that pretty much all nationally recognized holidays will be canceled. We are assuming that going to school will be a very rocky scenario since students starting in first grade, let alone, you know, all the other K through 12 grades are going to be having to learn how to read, write, send emails, use a laptop properly, any other devices like that. Whereas they should be, well, of course, you know, no family should have to go through this sort of scenario. But I would say that Carson City, our biggest strength is communities coming together and small business coming together, such as the small mom and pop joints that we have scattered throughout downtown, such as the small charity drives that we have every occasion, such as the Carson Now doing its best to propagate and advertise all the good that there is here in the city, such as several other small venues like the Boys and Girls Club, retirement homes, and just all these other places that you can't find anywhere else but here in Carson City, coming together, giving people what they need, such as masks, hand sanitizer, maybe some fellowship, you know, spending some time volunteering at the retirement home really helps. Spending some time, maybe at a latchkey if the schools are open by then, really helps. Just everyone coming together to sort of get people what they need. You know, if one store has a huge stock of hand sanitizer, they can sort of dish that out, and we could share in a way. It's not so much communism as it is allocating resources to the people who need it most, and sort of looking at those businesses and smiling back at them because they know that they did the right thing.
John?
Thank you. Thanks for replying that. Mine's a COVID-19 oriented question as well. Prior to COVID-19, Carson City tourism was on pace to have its best year in terms of direct visitor spending. As you're looking at, you joined the CTA board at a critical juncture in terms of tourism and the foreseeable future of tourism, what do you see as the priorities for Visit Carson City? Come out on the other side of this pandemic with a healthy, robust, but most importantly, sustainable and diverse tourism economy?
So glad you asked that question. I've been wanting to sort of describe my opinion on this for a very long time now. So the Nevada Day Parade happens every year, you know, around the end of October. I've found to be one of the happiest days in this entire city. You know, everyone's sort of on the same team, you know, political standing, race, ethnicity, sex, all that just sort of melts away, and we all sort of just become one unit. You know, I think it's very beautiful. So I would say finding more ways to make every single day kind of like that Nevada Day Parade, you know. Maybe bringing in some small entertaining items, like, I don't know, maybe having the carnival come more often, having certain bands come out here more often, having this committee getting more involved and seeing what the people would like to see, and more so what people outside the city would like to see. Because I found a lot of the people who are slowly moving into Nevada are either from California or from Utah and Arizona. That's not as big as California, though. California, I found, they move into the city, not just for tourism, but to stay, and then they slowly push their agendas onto Nevada that they had in California. Now, disregarding that, of course, you know, I think to get more tourism and more money, like you said, of course, because that's the big end goal for most communities is getting more money to spend in the next fiscal year. I would say more entertaining days, more fun things to do around the city. I think encouraging people to get out more, not work from home so much, but really working socially with the rest of the people that you surround yourself with, I think would really make this city a lot more engaging, and it would really pop up more on the map, so to speak.
Thank you, Ben, and let me add, congratulations on your escape from Los Angeles. And there used to be a bumper sticker around here that said, "We don't much care how you did it in California."
Benjamin, my question for you is, if you're familiar with the South Carson Street Road project, There is a roundabout being constructed at Stewart Street and South Carson Street, and that will be the new gateway to the downtown area. There is a place in the center of the roundabout for public art. Give us your ideas on how you, or what type of art you would envision for that area and how you would fund it.
I think we've gotten a lot of history of Nevada's founding. I think now it's time to almost work on not so much, I misspoke. Not Nevada's founding, I mean Carson City's discovery by Kit Carson in the 18th century. I find it almost, there's too much of the past going on, which is a great thing. I think exploring the past is always is always beneficial, especially if you want to become a success now. You got to look at the mistakes that were made and the successes that were made in order to become a success these days. Now, back to your question. That's really interesting. I did not know that the roundabout was going to feature art right in the middle. I think that's very poetic. So I would say have maybe certain carvings, sculptures, appraisals to all the people who, by the city standard and this committee as well, who made Carson City what it is today. The beautiful city, its simplicity, its low crime rates, it's everything. I think that it would be really beautiful to sort of pay homage and give back to the people and the families whose great-grandparents helped make this town so great.
Well, thank you. Do you have any final comments for us?
Well, I'm currently working on my second fictional book. It's actually going to take place in the fictional version of a rural state in Nevada. I really look forward to it. The book that I just published a few months ago, it is almost going to be for sale on Amazon Kindle. If any of you want to check it out, the book title is called Buck. It is written by myself, Benjamin Miller. I'm very proud of it. It takes place in Nevada. It has all sorts of fun aspects in it. I think that it would be a great experience for you to read. If you ever feel the need to show your family or friends, I'm a very young author and I take a lot of pride in it. And I would really appreciate if you gave it a chance and let me show off my creative writing skills to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, and feel free to stick around until we get through all the interviews if you want. Okay.
All right, so Elaine Spencer will not be here either. So next we would have Bobby Rader.
Hello, Bobby.
Hello?
You have the mic on,
Yes. Whew, thank you.
and we'll be able to understand you. So, Bobby, the way this works is that we're going to give you an opportunity to tell us about yourself, your background, and why you applied for this position. Then each one of us will ask you a question, which is the same question that we ask every applicant. So we'll go through that, and then we'll give you an opportunity for some wrap-up comments. Okay? So if you'd like to give us a little viewpoint into who you are and why you applied for this position.
I'm happy to. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to interview for this important position. My name is Bobby Rader. I'm currently the museum director for the Stewart Indian School Cultural Center and Museum, which is a brand-new museum at Stewart Indian School. If you haven't been there, I hope that you'll come and visit us. My background is that I'm originally from the Midwest. I have a museum studies degree. My career has always been working in museums and cultural organizations, arts organizations. I've only been in Carson City for 3 years, so I'm fairly new, but I wanted the opportunity to give back to the community that I live in now. I really love Nevada, and it's a wonderful community, and I wanted an opportunity to volunteer in some way and then offer whatever I can from my background that might be of use to the community. So I thought, as the at-large person on this board, I could speak to a new person in the area, but also my background in cultural and arts organizations. And also, I have a long history of working with Native American communities. So my previous job was in Lawrence, Kansas, and I helped another federal government boarding school called Haskell develop a museum. And so I've worked with Native American communities from all over the country, and also just culturally working with them to represent their arts and traditions, and helping them to find ways to preserve those arts and traditions in various ways. So currently at Stewart, I work with a Stewart advisory committee to develop this new museum, and it's all made up of Stewart alumni, the people who used to go to the school, and their family members. So I've gotten to know the 27 Native American tribes, bands, and colonies who exist in Nevada, and also many of the students from Stewart came from other Western states, so I've gotten to work with a lot of different other Western Native American communities. And I guess my one thing I would like to bring to the board if I was appointed to this position is that I feel that the Native American communities can offer a lot to the community of Carson City, and maybe people aren't as aware of what they do contribute. So at Stewart, there's a Stewart Father's Day powwow every summer on Father's Day weekend, and it brings in over 3,000 people to the community who many of them stay in the hotels, go to the restaurants, support the community economically. And there's also other activities that do support the community. At our museum, we hope to develop additional special events that will bring in not just Native American people, but other people to attend these events at our museum. There's a master plan for Stewart, and it's to develop the entire campus and to rehabilitate and renovate all of the buildings out there to be self-sustaining. So, for instance, there's an auditorium on the Stewart campus that needs to be renovated, but the city of Carson City has told us in other meetings that they're interested in a small performing arts center, and this is the kind of thing that Stewart could offer. So there are many ways that we can help support the community, and our museum is also, we participated in a marketing study when we were developing our museum, and we were anticipating 32,000 visitors to our museum. Of course, with COVID, that has not happened to the extent that we wanted it to on our first year. We just opened in January, but even just between January and March, we had 997 visitors, and that included a lot of school groups. So there's a lot that we can contribute from the Stewart community as far as the education of Nevada children as well, through the schools and educational activities that we hope to develop. And so those are some of the things that I feel that I can bring to this board. And we've also been very well supported by Visit Carson. They've been very supportive of promoting our museum and helping us to get the word out about our museum, so we're really grateful for that.
Thank you. Lori, we'll start with you this time.
Good afternoon. How are you, Bobby? So let's imagine that COVID's going to be around for another year or so. What is the one advertising thing you think you could come up with as to why people should visit Carson City during this COVID pandemic?
I think since living here and experiencing the area, one of the major things that I've noticed about Carson City and the surrounding area is that it's such a beautiful location, and there are so many outdoor activities to do. I know that Visit Carson has been doing a lot of work with the trail of historic properties in the city. I think promoting outdoor activities is a really good way to bring people in. I've run into people on those walks who've come here just for that. And also just the parks, the rivers, the outdoor activities that are offered here that are safer maybe than indoor activities are at the moment. And, you know, it may be that we are in this situation for a while, and I think we all need to find ways to adapt, but I think advertising, the outdoor opportunities here, the historical aspect of Carson City, which is varied and interesting and unique with Stewart as part of that equation. Also the prison, also the historic district and the Riverwalk. There are so many things that I think Carson City could promote to bring in visitors. Sure.
John?
Thank you. Thanks for applying. Prior to COVID-19, Carson City tourism was on pace to have the best year in terms of direct visitor spending. As you're looking to join the CTA board at such a critical juncture and the foreseeable future of tourism along with the tourism currently, what do you see as the priorities for Visit Carson City? To come out on the other side of this pandemic with a healthy, robust, and more importantly, sustainable and diverse tourism economy.
I understand the economic impact of COVID. Our museum is funded by the state tourism department, and it's 62% supported by lodging tax. So when COVID hit and there was a shutdown, our budget was cut between the governor's cuts and the tourism department cuts by $100,000. So we understand the limits of being funded by the lodging tax, but also the importance of it in funding tourism. And what we've learned is that there are other ways of trying to bring income into our museum, and we've been very successful in writing grants. We've actually gotten some private donations as well to help us support the tax cuts that we've had, or excuse me, the state budget cuts that we've had. So I think from my observations of how the Visit Carson office has handled these budget or these cuts in lodging tax revenue, I think they've chosen a very good path to weather this storm and to get through this time. I think that the path that they're on is a good one, and that it's going to be profitable eventually. I think that people will react well to the campaign. I've watched how Visit Carson has changed their website, how they've gone out of their way to make people safe to come here, and I think they've done that in a very safe way and a very supportive way, and I think people will respond to that campaign that they've had.
Stacey?
Hi, Bobby. As you mentioned, room taxes are currently used to fund an arts and cultural director position. That tax sunsets, it ends in May of 2021. The person working in that role has served both as an employee of Visit Carson City and an employee of the city itself. But the position is open right now. So with it vacant, we have an opportunity to have that position function in that role in either location. So I'd like to know where you think the position should work and why. And secondly, do you think that room tax should continue after May of 2021, or should we fund it in a different way?
Excuse me, should you fund the position in a different way?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, going forward.
Yes, I'm aware of the work that was done by the previous arts director, and feel that there is a need for both the commissions that work with cultural and arts. I understand there's a city arts cultural commission and as well as the Cultural and Tourism Authority, and they really have different focus. Maybe main goals are a little bit different, similar, related, but different. So I guess my take would be, I feel it's important to have an arts director who could focus on the arts that would support the Cultural and Tourism Authority work of this board. I do think the room tax is important, but it would be, in my opinion, it would be nice if the city could fund that position on a permanent basis with other funding, maybe general funds. whatever the city calls that. General funds, okay. Because of the importance of the arts. I really feel like the arts are very important to Carson City, and there's such a history of it here. And I've really enjoyed getting to meet the artists and getting to know the arts community here, and I'd like to see that continue on a permanent basis if that's possible.
Thank you.
Bobby, my question for you is, if you're familiar with the South Carson Road project, there is a roundabout being constructed at Stewart Street and South Carson Street,
Okay,
which will be the new gateway to downtown from the south. Part of that roundabout is being set aside as a potential public art venue. So I'd like to know what your thoughts are on what you might envision for the art to go be part of the gateway to downtown, and how would you fund it?
wow. So you're asking what kind of art piece would be appropriate in that location?
Oh, what type of art piece? That doesn't even have to be an art piece. It could be a theme. I'm asking you, what do you envision?
I hadn't really thought of that before. You mentioned a gateway, so if you see it as a gateway into Carson City from that part of the community, I think some kind of reference to the historical nature of Carson City and the fact that this was a part of the path that people took to get to California, the whole Oregon Trail, the path to get to Lake Tahoe, the history of the Washoe and other tribes who are from the area. It's got a history as a trail. It's got a history as a gateway. So I think any kind of art piece or welcome kind of signage would be that kind of thing. I'm not exactly sure how the arts are funded here. In Lawrence, Kansas, where I came from, there was a city 1% tax that funded public art. So I'm not sure exactly how Carson City funds their public art. I'm aware that the Cultural Arts Commission has some grants that they have available, but I'm not really sure if you want to do some kind of competition to have people propose a project that would follow a theme that the city identifies that they would like to see as that art piece.
Great. Thank you very much. Any final comments?
Just that I really appreciate the opportunity to interview. I think the city of Carson City has been very welcoming to me, and I really appreciate that, and I'd like to give back to the community in some way, and just invite you all to come out to the Stewart Indian School Cultural Center Museum. It's really unique and a unique part of Carson's history, so thank you very much.
Great. Thank you for applying, and feel free to stick around until we get through the interviews if you wish.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Next, we have Danny Miller.
How's it going?
Yep. How are you?
Good.
Danny, is the green light on mic there?
Yep.
All right, then you're ready to go. The way this works, so you know, is that we will give you an opportunity to tell us a little bit about yourself and why you're applying for this position. Then each member of the board will ask you a question, which is the same question that every applicant gets asked.
Okay.
And then we'll give you an opportunity for some final comments.
Okay.
So if you'd like to tell us a little bit about yourself and why you're applying for this position.
Okay. Originally from Santa Cruz. Been in Carson since 2003. I'm a graphic designer. I love Carson City. I worked for tourism with David. Was the art director for Nevada Magazine. Before that, I was a designer, just a designer for Nevada Magazine. I worked for Governor Sandoval his first term, did all his PSAs and so on. I loved it. Found myself falling in love with Nevada first. And then once I was here, I love Carson City. I like the small town feel. Kind of reminds me a little bit of Santa Cruz when I grew up. People are kind, people are nice, everyone's friendly. I like that it's the capital of Nevada. I like that a lot of people don't know it's the capital of Nevada, and I like to be able to share that with people. When I have friends that come up to visit, we go everywhere, we visit everything about Carson City. It's just a great little town. People are great. I think it's a great town.
And tell us why you're applying for the Culture and Tourism Authority.
For the same reason. I love this. I love this town. Since I've been here, I've seen it change a lot, and I think mostly for the better. I'm pretty active in the community. I do a lot of stuff with the activities in Carson. I'm a mountain biker, so I'm part of that crazy crowd, I guess. And in the last, 4 or 5 years or so, I've talked to people and they love the direction. And I think, to be honest with you, in the last year or two, I've heard the opposite. And it's bothered me. I've brought some stuff up to people. And quite frankly, if you want to make change or be part of a change or part of a growth, instead of just talking about it, you should try to help and be part of the solution.
Thank you. So I'm going to hand you off to another mountain biker. John?
Yeah, I have to be honest, I'm slowing down.
I've never been fast.
Well, following up with what you just said about the last couple of years, I'm going to ask a kind of a COVID-19 question because this last half a year has been dicey. Prior to COVID-19, Carson City tourism was on pace to have its best year in terms of direct visitor spending. As you're looking to join the CTA board at such a critical juncture for tourism and the foreseeable future of tourism, what do you see as the priorities for Visit Carson City to come out on the other side of this pandemic with a healthy, robust, but most importantly, sustainable and diverse tourism economy? And put that in the context of not just COVID, but you said the last couple of years you've heard something, more negative. So what direction would you go?
I think it's hugely important to get the businesses a little bit more stable. In the last few years, I've seen businesses come into Carson City then leave for whatever reason. And it's hard to bring people in from out of the area if there's nothing to attract them to come here. I think stuff like the Brewery Arts Center, Carson City Off-Road, Taste of Downtown, those are huge for this area, I believe. And the last few years, I haven't seen these things promoted that much. Everyone in town knows about it, but people outside of the town don't hear about it like they used to. If there's no businesses for people to come, they can come to see a concert, but then what do they do after the concert or that whole weekend if there's not a lot to do? And I believe there is a lot to do, but I don't believe it's promoted very, very well. And I think Carson City is great. People love this town that live here, and they go out and they support the town as much as they can. But I think we need people from out of the area, and not just around the area, but from Arizona, outside California, Oregon. I think we need to attract people to come. This is the capital, And like I said, a lot of people don't know that. And when they do know it's here, they don't know. I think they think of Virginia City. Oh, let's go there and then visit Virginia City. Or I think we need to find ways to keep people here.
Thank you. Stacy?
Hi, Danny,
Hi,
thank you.
Stacy.
Thanks for applying.
Yeah.
Right now, we have a room tax that's funding an arts and cultural director position. The tax ends at the end of May of next year.
Okay.
The person working in that job has been an employee both of the Visit Carson City and of the city itself at different times. The position's open now, and with it open, we have the opportunity to put that position really in either place. So where do you think that position should work, and why do you think that? And then secondly, do you think we should continue the room tax or find some other source of funding?
So you were saying that position was, the person had both positions?
There's only one position.
Okay.
And at different times, it has rested in different places. For a while, they worked for the Convention and Tourism Authority, and then for a while, the person worked for the city. Could really be anywhere. So I'm just asking for your thoughts on where you think it should go and why.
I think you keep them with the Visitors Authority. I mean, that's who needs the financing to come into. So if they have stake in that organization, then that's what they should be pulling it in for, personally. And then I think room tax is huge. I think that's where we should try to capitalize. I know working for tourism, that's where they got most of their funding. And if you can bring people into the area and fill up all the hotels and all the rooms, we make more money. It's more of an incentive to get people to come here. You bring more people in to stay in the rooms, we get the room tax, businesses are getting paid, there's money coming into the restaurants, into the casinos, everywhere benefits, I believe, from that.
Thank you.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
So assume that maybe COVID's still going to be around for the next year. What would be the one thing you would advertise to get visitors to pick Carson City?
It's a tough one because if we keep going on the path we are, where I just saw the update today, we have we had a couple new cases and tons of recoveries. That's a good selling point. However, we have to balance that with California is going the opposite way. So are we going to work on bringing COVID here? So I think you have to find a good balance and let people know that want to come here, that we want to come here, that COVID doesn't stop us from living. We have activities we do. Outdoor activities are all around here. Our restaurants are following the safety rules. The mask wearing is working everywhere it seems to be. And I don't hear complaints that much. I mean, no one likes to wear a mask, so you do hear that, but no one, I go out as often as I can, and I still have not seen anyone yell at a server or not go into a store, Costco. I mean, it's just crazy. So I think you focus on that. If you come here, you're going to be safe.
Danny, my question for you has to do with the gateway to downtown. So if you're familiar with the South Carson Road project, there's a roundabout being constructed at Stewart Street and South Carson Street. And that will be the gateway to downtown from the south. As part of that roundabout, there's an opportunity for a public art display of some type. I'd like to get your thoughts on what you would envision for that roundabout and how you would fund it.
As far as artwork, so when we did the freeway, we have all those neat little artwork all around. It shows nature, it shows, the trees that we have here, the aspens. It shows our whole area. I think the gateway would need to show the same, however, be more specific to Carson City, have some, mountain bike type thing, or hiking or horseback riding, more emphasis on the train system. And as far as funding, I'm not a huge fan of taxes, but I think we would need to figure out some way that doesn't upset the people live here so much. Again, I love room tax, but you can only do that so much before you start not getting visitors because it costs too much. We can go to Douglas or Reno and not pay the room tax that Carson's paying. So I think we'd have to find a good balance between room tax and I don't know what else we can tax. Homeowner tax, no one likes to do that. So I think it'd just have to be discussion and see what the community would like. That's one thing that I've noticed when I'm out and about talking to people. People feel like boards like this make decisions. I know we have like open discussions at the board meetings, but I've come to some, not particularly this one, where there's 3 people in the audience. So I think getting the community more engaged is a huge way to figure that stuff out.
Great, thank you. Thank you for applying. Any final comments?
No, I would love to be part of this. I think it's, like I said, I love the town. I think if you want to see change, or if you don't want to see change, but you want some kind of direction, you have to be part of it. So I'd like to be part of it.
Great, thank you. Feel free to stick around. We have one more person to interview, and then we'll be making the decision on the appointments.
All right, thank you.
Next is Dominic Martinelli.
Yep, go ahead and sit in the middle. The mic is already on.
Green. Hey, howdy.
Yep, good. So the way this works, Dom, is that we're going to give you an opportunity to tell us a little bit about yourself and why you applied for this position. And then each member of the board will ask you a question, which is the same question that they've asked each applicant.
Okay.
And then when we're done with the questions, you'll have an opportunity to make some final comments.
Okay, thanks.
So why don't you tell us a little?
Can I speak without
May.
this? Okay,
Yes.
thanks. Hi, I'm Dominic Martinelli. I moved to Carson City, Nevada in the year 2000. I won't tell you where I'm from, at least I get any bias. So I will say that I've had a really good time being here. My background is electronics manufacturing, believe it or not, and a degree in advertising. So I grew up with an electronics company, getting to see how it was run from every single aspect of it, from the most minimal of sweeping floors to plastics department, injection molding, quality assurance, quality control, assembly lines and things like that. From that background, ultimately I wound up in an advertising school, spent 4 years getting a degree, got a degree, and then specialized in multimedia design. So I spent a whole lot of time programming. I took a job out here 14 years ago at Northern Nevada Coin, where I have been the back-end programmer. They used to run software that I wrote myself for the last 12 years. But more recently, 2 years ago, we've been switching over to another platform, a WordPress platform, and I've written custom modules to make sure that our business still functions on a different platform. So I guess I would say that I do a lot of work here locally. I give back to the community in multiple ways. A member of the Bridge Church, as a result, I ran the food ministry out here for 3 years, my wife and I. So I've been involved in this area for a while. I have also spent a lot of time as an artist locally. Used to be a member of the NAA Gallery and things like that, but more recently, somebody showed me a guy named Steve White, who you might be familiar with in Sparks, who's been out here, I'm sure, talking to this board. Anyway, the last time I was here, I talked to the mayor, and the mayor said that the sheriff had better things to do than arrest artists on the streets of Carson City. So I've been a big advocate for free speech zones in our places, when it's under permit, so that artists still have a right to be artists and have their expression seen or heard by the general public. So I've spent a lot of time advocating for the arts and artists here locally, and I am a local artist. I live downtown. I walk most of these streets on a regular basis and spend a lot of time in downtown Carson City because I still work here. I walked to work today and, walked home this afternoon, that kind of thing. So that's what I've got. That's why I'm here. And I want to give back to Carson City because I love it here. It's absolutely the most wonderful place I've ever lived. So there you go.
Thank you. Stacy, are we on you? Yeah.
Hi, Dominic. Just out of curiosity, what kind of art is your specialty?
Acrylic painting. So yeah, I spent some time painting. I've done some sculpting in the past. I've done a little bit of oil. Mostly I spend time with acrylic, and I paint plein air. So I'm out there with people. And sometimes it's impressionistic, and sometimes it's realistic. So, I actually am the first artist to paint a picture of the McFadden Plaza when it first opened, and the McFadden heirs actually bought it. So, I'm kind of around.
All right. So currently we have room tax that supports an arts and cultural director. It's a position.
Sure.
The tax for that position ends. It sunsets in May of 2021. The person working in that job has at different times worked both as an employee of the Tourism Authority and as an employee of the city. But the position's vacant right now. So with it vacant, we have an opportunity to have that position employed in either location, visit Carson City or with the city itself. So I'd like to know where you think the position should work and why you feel that way. And I'd like to know if you think room tax revenue should continue to pay for it, or should we find another way to pay for it?
Well, I have not considered anything like that, so you'll have to give me a second to take that in, and I may talk out loud while I'm considering it. Currently, it's been supported by room tax, is that correct?
That's correct.
And what was the rationale for supporting it with room tax to begin with?
Well, I think you'd have to ask the various boards, but I suspect that the reason that room tax supports anything is because the hotel motel industry feels as though they'll put heads in beds.
Fair
And
enough.
That's the bottom line for them.
So having an arts and cultural director, essentially, right? That's what we're talking about, the Mark Salinas position. Bringing in various different events, promoting them, making sure that they're well attended to get people here makes a lot of sense. Visit Carson City is our visitors bureau, is it not? So I don't know. I think that a hybrid position where they share the expenses makes a whole lot of sense. It's like almost the perfect partnership. I wouldn't even mess with it. I would call it about a 50-50 job and move forward so it doesn't impact anybody's one budget hugely.
Thank you.
Lori?
Good afternoon, and thank you so much for applying.
Sure. Hi, Lori.
So consider that maybe COVID's going to be around over this next year, and you are going to use your advertising background and tell me what you would do to let the world know they should visit Carson City.
Well, I think the world knows that they should visit Carson City, but they just need to be a little bit more compelled. We have a lot of great things here that don't involve necessarily rubbing shoulders with people. I think that the days of sole gambling is the only thing that draws people to Carson City are largely coming to an end. I would think that it's time to start promoting the outdoors a whole lot more. The bike thing is the right thing to do. One of my favorite events in Carson City happens to be the farmer's market. Not only because I volunteer there, but because it's one of my favorite events. It really brings a lot of what is so good about downtown Carson City, specifically probably the west side of Carson, in which case it's a little biased towards the west side of Carson City, but it certainly showcases what we're about. We're a small town. I don't know why we keep trying to be a metro area. We are a small town, but we're a small town with heritage. And I think that that's what brings people to Carson City. That will continue to bring people to Carson City. I think that emphasizing our heritage, making sure that museum is never closed is probably a very, very important thing for people, because I can't tell you how many times people are on the streets of Carson City with nothing to do on Mondays because the museum's not open, et cetera, et cetera. We see them all the time wandering the streets with nothing to do and wanting to spend money and wanting to be here. So those continued type events, the natural beauty, we have great trails, we have a great atmosphere. We do a lot of sporting stuff, on the outskirts of town at the fields. Those are things that are continued to happen, and I know that COVID's going to cut down on the attendance for the crowd, but COVID will not cut down on the attendance for people who actually still want to play sports if that does loosen up at all. Meanwhile, if it doesn't loosen up at all, I think that we can take the mask thing and actually make it work for an advantage. Once again, we are a small town and we are a tight-knit community and people getting together, and yet social distancing, we're still close even though we're far apart. And I think that something along those lines, emphasizing the closeness even though we're separated, would probably be a good direction to go for Carson City.
John?
Thank you. I have a full question for you, but before that, I wasn't sure I heard in your answer to Supervisor Dromey's question where you would put the arts coordinator. You did answer the part about the room tax, but would you put it with the city or the CTA?
Well, being from a state where some people could wear like 13 hats and work for multiple different agencies, I will say that having somebody that either spends half time one place, half time another, or being centrally located and being funded by both makes a whole lot of sense. And I'm not sure exactly where that is, but there's the visitors down by the train museum, right? We have a visitors office down there, and then we have the new one that's downstairs next to the museum, correct? And that's where
There's
Mark-
only one. It's just that one.
Mark has just been in that one.
The chamber's down there.
Yeah, so down at the chamber. I don't know why that wouldn't be the location to physically house them, because it needs to be an accessible place.
Well, now I think I know where you came from, even though you won't tell us.
Okay, fair.
Prior to COVID-19, Carson City tourism was on pace to have its best year in terms of direct visitor spending. As you're looking to join the CTA board at such a critical juncture, in terms of tourism and the foreseeable future for tourism, what do you see as the priorities for Visit Carson City to come out on the other side of this pandemic with a healthy, robust, but most importantly, sustainable and diverse tourism economy for Carson City?
Gosh, that is a big question, John. Going forward, I think that we need a bit more inclusiveness. We have a huge Latino base in Carson City that is relatively unaffected by many of the things that we do, sadly. I think that the closest thing that we get to involving the whole community of Carson City is our parade in October. Nevada Day is a huge deal. Nevada Day is a huge deal and probably one of the best marketing things that we should be capitalizing on for this city. And I don't know how it's going to change with COVID, but definitely coming out of a post-COVID thing, the Nevada Day Parade has got to be one of the biggest things that we should be pushing around here. It brings out the very best of our community. It's representative of everybody that lives here. It represents small town America at its best, honestly, when all of us get together and have that event. As far as reaching the Latinos, has anybody discussed an indoor soccer league and an indoor soccer facility? Because if we're going to be about serving Carson City, we're going to actually have to look at the demographics of Carson City at some point. It's not just a bunch of people drinking wine on the west side. I mean, it literally does need to be a little more diverse and inclusive, and I know that we've had outreach in the past, and I'm sorry if I'm speaking out of order, because I'm sure if you all have done like a million things, I'm sorry, but I haven't seen it. I've lived here 20 years. I see the large thrust of the things that we continue to do revolve around downtown and somehow some of the more classic ways that Carson City is known. I don't think that dope tourism is the thing that we really want to get into, even though that seems to be one of the reasons that I've talked to a lot of people and they're here just so they can go get stoned and then go to Costco. I don't think that that's like long-term sustainable for our economy, and I don't know if that's really what we want. However, it's a reality, so we have to deal with that reality as well. Long-term, events that are inclusive, one of the thoughts that I've had is, I represent a lot of free speech artists, although I don't really represent them, they're kind of a loose group. But the fact that artists have the right to be on the streets and there's really not a lot that anybody can do, you can't force me to get a business license in order to express my point of view. Because if you did, then you'd have to get a business license every time you open your mouth. So as an artistic American, I have the right to express myself with a picture, and if you want to pay me for it, that's your choice. And I don't need a tax ID in order to do that. That's kind of counterintuitive for business and business boards who want to bring in tax revenue. That's not exactly a popular thing. However, the atmosphere that is created when many creative people get around and start doing those kinds of things is one where people actually go as a destination to go buy stuff from artists. And as a result, they also spend money on hotels and food and everything else that goes with it, and nightlife. So it's also another option. I've heard that people were kicking around an art town kind of idea. Well, it's going to have to be more than just, the few galleries that we have in Carson City. It's going to take a commitment, but I believe that there are really talented people in this area that just maybe need a little education to know that they have the right to be out there. I don't know that they know that yet. I've been trying to educate them, but you'd think I was saying some kind of revolutionary thing. Most people think I'm a pirate for that, but I will say that, we've given a lot to the arts. There is a lot of art space. A lot of it's hidden. One of the best museums we have is down here at the State Capitol building, the Assembly building. If you go floor to floor and look at the walls, that's the most prolific museum we have in Carson City for actual work on the walls. We might want to do something about that if we're serious about art. Like, it needs to be more than just that. And if it is that, it needs to be a little more accessible, and people actually need to know that that's on the list. And I know that we have a brochure that says where things are, like the back of Comma Coffee is a gallery, and, and our other gallery at the Brewery Arts Center. But I think we need to make a concerted effort to really double down on this if that's the direction we want to go. We have a diverse starting point, and I think that's the best marketing that we can do. Come here. Visit other places, come here, stay here while you're visiting other places, i.e. Tahoe, i.e. Reno. Why stay in the hustle and bustle of a big city when you can have cute charm here in Carson City, a historic city, where you can kind of casually go with your family and then go out and do those, crazy events that we don't actually have the big stuff like that. That's fine. Why not? Why aren't more people staying here? I think our hotels are conveniently located. We have new hotels now that are this is the place to start from. And I think that, your adventure begins here, and I'm pretty sure that some of our marketing, something like that, at least once that I've seen, it really is true. An adventure for this whole region starts here in Carson City.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dom. My question for you is if you're familiar with the South Carson Street Road project.
The roundabout.
The roundabout, right?
Yes.
So there's a roundabout being constructed at Stewart Street and South Carson Street, which
Yes.
will be the new gateway to downtown coming in from the south.
Fair?
There's an opportunity at that roundabout for a public art display or some sort of themed art display.
Sure.
So give me your thoughts on what you would envision for that gateway and how you would fund it.
That's always good. Well, for starters, I'd just like to say that Nevadans are notoriously bad with roundabouts. Sorry, guys. Love you all. Very difficult to drive, especially, I'm on two wheels sometimes, and people just stop. They're very hard to deal with. But that being said, I really enjoy the prospect of putting something out there to represent Carson City. And I really love what they've done with the freeway project, honestly, the Eagles and various other things. And I think that that's something along the lines that I would see there. As far as funding it, I know that you can get artists to compete over whose design is going to be there. And I would actually think that is some conglomeration of pulling stuff from a little bit of everybody involved in Carson City to fund a project like that. It can't just be the room tax. It can't just be the road tax, even though it's in the middle of a road. It can't just be tourism. It has to be a little bit of everything, and that's how I would do it. I look at a way to spread it across multiple agencies instead of making one person responsible for it. I know that there is I believe it's a state mandate that 10% of the state budget is for the arts, something like that. 1%. Well, 1% of how much? There's still a percentage there available. I know that there are 60 some odd agencies in Reno that are funded directly through arts stuff in Reno. And I know that we have a number of agencies that are funded as well. There's a lot of nonprofits out there that certainly pull in a lot of money just to continue to be nonprofits. Not quite sure what they do. But I will say that I know that there is money available in small batches from individual people as well that could fund something like that. And I'm pretty sure that having an opportunity for the locals to buy in, i.e., some private donations, would also not be out of the question. And seeking that would actually not be out of the question, especially at this time with our government shrinking in every direction. So,
Thank you.
sure.
Any final comments?
Primarily I came out today because I want another opportunity to give back. I did the farmer's market last year as free for kids and let kids paint for free in my booth all summer. And, I'm always there early, I always leave late. And I really enjoyed it. I really love our community, and I see this as yet another opportunity to love on the community, to have a voice of, like, maybe not your voice, but definitely a voice of somebody who's out there in the community on this board, where you're making decisions that impact all of us in a little bit, especially the kinds of people that you will bring in the future. There are certain markets that, although they have money, I don't know if that's right for the city. I don't know if it's a right fit, for some of the people that we may reach out to. Other people, you know what, I think it is the right fit. I would like to see downtown more utilized by families. But, I walk with 2 children, 13 and under, downtown, and at 8 o'clock at night, we have to avoid the bars because of the coarse language and what's going on at the bars. And everything else is closed because, all the state offices are closed. There's nothing going on there at nights and weekends. So it's just kind of dark. So our beautiful sidewalks downtown exist for us to walk from place to place. I'd like to see more destinations downtown, especially for people with little people, because, hey, we're a community, and part of a thriving community is all age groups. And, those kids are going to grow up and have kids, and hopefully they'll choose to stay here too, because it's such a great place to live. I'd like to see that continue. I'd like to see a voice for that on this commission. I'm sure that there is a voice like that, but I'd like to also be that voice. Somebody that is willing to look at it from the totally outsider perspective, that doesn't have the city background, that doesn't have, maybe the budgetary, financial guru-ish stuff to look at it, and just kind of get down to the nuts and bolts and say, hey, that sounds like it will probably work, and here's why. Or I don't think that's going to work, and here's why. And that's where I think that I can be an asset as a voice of just a normal guy who lives in Carson City.
Great, thank you very much.
Thank you.
We are now at the hard part where we get to make a decision on the appointments. So feel free to stick around and we'll get through the hard part. So ladies and gentlemen, anybody like to go first?
Sure, I'll go since I'm the board's rep on the CTA. If you don't mind, I'll
Sure.
pull rank and go first. I think the easy pick is Steve Kem in the hotel motel category, because he's the only one left between him and Mike Jones, who's currently on the board. So I think those two are easy. I continue to be blown away by the quality of people we have in this community who are interested in serving our community. And today was, again, no exception. Every single one of the candidates who came in and spoke today are clearly passionate, have great ideas, and are would be great fits for the Convention and Tourism Authority. So we have 4 citizens who applied, 1 position open. Again, I really wouldn't hesitate to put any one of them on there, and if I'm forced to make a choice, my pick would be Bobby Rader. I really felt like the position she holds and the knowledge she has about Native American tribes, about her contacts in the Native American community, not just here, but in adjoining states, can be a benefit to the CTA and its ability to attract folks. So that's who I would choose.
Lori?
So I'm going to concur with Stacy's comments. I thought that Bobby brings an element, one of not a long-term resident, but one of 3 years that has maybe an eye to what brings people to the community, a recent eye, plus the connection with the tribes in the other states as to maybe that's some avenue that can be connected that we have overlooked. She might be able to bring that to the scene, but I also want to just honestly say how impressed I was with Dominic, having just a completely different point of view to look at. But one of my concerns on this board is it's almost, I don't know, going to be brand new. Michael would be the returning one, and then Stacy. So I'm concerned that I don't necessarily want to see 3 or 4 brand-new thought processes at the same time, but I still welcome definitely. And then I really want to tell Steve how much I appreciated that he's right, that you have to participate if you want to see change. So you don't sit from the outside, you work on the inside to get things accomplished. So I agree with Stacy that it was pretty nice to have such great candidates here today, but I'm going to have to go with Bobby and then Michael and Steve for the hotel.
Well, I get the joy of making Brad irrelevant, unless Brad wants to join us, because I also am throwing my hat to Bobby, and I agree with what you said about great candidates. One of the things that intrigued me about Bobby was she came here from Lawrence, Kansas, from the Midwest, and I'm from the Midwest, and as a person who's probably the most newbie person on this board, having moved here in 2008 and applied for the Cultural Commission and was turned down. And I got the impression then, although no evidence, that it was like, oh, well, we don't know this guy and we know these people. And I don't know that my credentials were all that great. My wife did the same thing about 7 months later. Also, somebody else was chosen. So I liked, actually, the fact that she's only been here for 3 years. Because those of us who've come here, let's say in the last 25 years, had to go through that process of being new, but at the same time, I think, like everyone who said today, you fall in love with this community immediately. In fact, you probably fall in love with it before you come here. So I think she'll contribute to the board, to the CTA. And Stacy's on the CTA, and so I'll be frank, his leaning that way makes me lean that way as well.
Great. So to clarify, we have one reappointment in the hotel motel category, which is Mike Jones. Then we have one applicant for the second hotel motel position, which is Steve Kemen. We had nobody that was applicable to the other commercial interest position, so that position will remain open. And then we have 4 applicants for the citizen at large position, and we have 3 votes for Bobby Rader to fill that position. So if somebody would like to make a motion.
I got it. I move to appoint Mike Jones and Steve Kim to fill the hotel motel industry positions, and Bobby Rader to fill a citizen at large position, all for 2-year terms expiring in July of 2022 on the Culture and Tourism Authority.
I would ask for a friendly amendment to include that there were no applicants for the commercial interest position and that position will remain open until otherwise filled.
Yeah, I will amend my motion to include that comment and further to direct staff to reopen the position and advertise it.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any final discussion?
Yeah, just quickly, Dominic and Danny, thank you for applying. I hope that you will continue to be involved. The Culture and Tourism Authority is a public body. We'd love to see you come to the meetings and participate or send comments about things you see or hear. It's just like everything that, our community works because people get interested and participate. And it's just unfortunate that we didn't have room for everybody on this body. So thank you both very much.
All right, I would echo those comments. So all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. All right, the vote is 4-0 to approve Mike Jones, Steve Kim, and Bobby Rader to fill the vacant positions. Thank you all. All right, we're now on agenda item 17B for possible action, discussion and possible action on a business impact statement related to and the introduction on first reading of an ordinance revising certain qualification criteria for the Office of Supervisor on the Board of Supervisors in accordance with the qualification requirements established by Carson City Charter. And just as a note to be read into the record, we did receive late public comment in writing from Betsy Strasburg that will be attached to the official record. Who's taking this item? Nancy?
I'll start and then Dan will probably finish. So this proposed ordinance is to correct inconsistency in our existing Carson City Municipal Code,
Can you bring the mic a little closer?
Oh.
Thank you.
which requires that a supervisor be a taxpayer on real property located in Carson City. This requirement was repealed from the Carson City Charter in 1977, but this change was never reflected in the city's code. So this ordinance will make that change.
Dan?
Well, thanks very much, Nancy, for teeing that off. Nancy's explained it, accurately in summary form. For the benefit of the public, I do want to emphasize, before this board that, this proposed ordinance and the amendatory language that's included in it does not in any way alter or modify or create new law in CCMC. So I want to be absolutely clear on that point. This ordinance, in effect, does serve as a technical corrections bill. I've provided a legal analysis in the form of a memorandum that was also provided as supporting material along with the business impact statement that's required by NRS to be prepared. So the matter before this board today is for introduction on first reading this ordinance, which, again, as I said, really only does one thing, and that's to bring in line for consistency purposes language that's currently captured by CCMC as it relates to qualification criteria for a seat on the Board of Supervisors in line with what's contained in the city charter. As more thoroughly discussed in that legal memo, it's the language of the city charter that supersedes and controls any inconsistencies in CCMC. And as Nancy had alluded to in her introduction, there is a disconnect right now. That disconnect, which is, what had generated this inconsistency, is that the city charter was originally enacted by the Nevada legislature in 1969. At that time of an enactment, the city charter did include a provision that required as one of the qualifying criteria for a supervisor to be, in essence, a real property owner here in Carson City. So when CCMC was enacted, or that provision of CCMC was enacted in 1977, it essentially mirrored that language almost identically. What happened, that was in 1974. What happened, however, was 1977. And what happened in 1974 was the city charter had been amended once again by its charter review committee and then also subsequently enacted by the Nevada legislature to repeal that original provision, which required real property ownership. So as you can see here, for timing purposes, with the enactment in 1969, but then the repeal of that real property ownership by the Nevada legislature and the Charter Review Committee, what happened was in between those two instances, CCMC was enacted, but then it was never subsequently amended to reflect that change and that amendment. So once again, this is essentially a technical corrections bill because the provision that requires real property ownership as it exists in CCMC is in essence unenforceable as a matter of law because it is superseded by and preempted by the city charter language.
Thank you, Dan. Any questions on that explanation?
I would just like to respond a little bit to Betsy Strasburg. I think Mr. Yu certainly probably handled the vast majority of her questions, but just really want to speak to her second to last paragraph dealing with should we be bringing other conditions or qualifications so that you have a commitment to the city's success and the 6-month requirement for residency, should it be longer? My answer is, I think that any board that's looking at the qualifications of the candidates that are before you, you'll take many things into consideration of what's in the best interest of the city when you make that selection. And I don't see adding anything to the CCMC or asking the Charter Review Committee to consider further qualifications is warranted. So I just wanted to respond to her additional question because I think it comes out in the interview processes. And I don't think just because somebody could have been a renter for 10 years because maybe they just don't want to buy somewhere or have debt. Who knows the decisions they want to make, but it doesn't mean they haven't lived here for 10 years. So I think we can ferret out qualifications when we do interviews. Just a thought.
Well, and I would just add, this is not only for us filling a position, this is for people running for the position. So more importantly, not that we'll look at multiple things, but that the citizens will have the opportunity through the election process to choose who they'd like to choose. And the other thing I would say to Betsy is that she feels that strongly about those two items, although I'm not sure about the constitutionality of requiring someone to be a property owner to hold a position. I would suspect that that's probably not constitutional. However, if the 6-month thing is something that she's passionate about, every 2 years, we do have a charter review committee. Citizens in this community are encouraged to submit potential changes through that body, and this would be one of those items that would get brought up by the charter review committee, and if they approved it, it would come to us for consideration. So I would encourage you to do that if you felt that strongly about it.
Mr. Yukin, I don't know, is residence requirement also a statutory one, or is that something the Charter Review Committee could look at to expand?
So, I mean, that's a great question, Supervisor Bagwell. And I would just, draw everyone's attention to Article 2, Section 2 of the Charter, which again it's reiterated in my memo that was provided. And that is one of the requirements is you have to be an actual and bona fide resident of Carson City for a minimum of 6 months immediately preceding, that person's, election. So that is currently an existing qualifying criterion. There are some other criteria that's listed in there as well. I did have an opportunity to review Ms. Strasburg's written comments in advance. I want to speak to another thing that she had brought up in her written comments, which was a comment or a question regarding, I think it was something along the lines of, well, why wouldn't this Board of Supervisors, for example, endeavor to align, the charter language to CCMC? And again, I think I probably, had already addressed that issue earlier. It's a matter of preemption is really what it is. I mean, it's with, like, for example, the supremacy clause embedded in the U.S. Constitution, federal law is going to supersede any conflict in state law. Local regulations and local ordinances are going to be superseded by the preemption doctrine, by any inconsistencies in state law. And the city charter, as also analyzed in the memorandum, supersedes and controls over any conflicting language in CCMC. So that's actually backwards. It's reverse in concept. So it's really the city charter itself, which, as you all know, is up for review and for potential revisions every couple of years, immediately preceding the next regular session of the Nevada legislature. So certainly, as Supervisor Giomi also referenced, if you're a member of the community and you have certain ideas or proposals, certainly you're invited to do that. But again, this proposed amendment itself doesn't really do anything novel. It's nothing new. It doesn't change law. It doesn't create new law. All it does is it amends the existing language in CCMC for full compliance with the controlling language, which is embedded in the city charter. And I'll also note, just as one last thing, I only very briefly touched on the business impact statement, which of course is included with the packet. I'll just note for the record that it was determined, at least by staff and myself, and as presented to this board, that it has no economic impact. Business impact statement is regardless of the impact for an ordinance introduction. With certain limited exemptions in NRS, we have to prepare it, but we did not send it out to any trade associations or the chamber, for example, because obviously this relates only to supervisor qualification criteria and does not have any impact on businesses in the local community. So I would ask that this board accept that business impact statement as prepared and as signed by Nancy as the city manager, and then also to introduce this technical corrections ordinance on first reading.
And I suspect that if the mayor were here today, that he would remind us that the charter, the city charter, should be difficult to amend, and that every time we recommend changes to the charter and it goes to the legislature, you are giving the legislature the opportunity to also change the charter because you're opening it up, and sometimes that may not be good for us.
I think that's an excellent point that you made, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem. I kind of look at the city charter as sort of the local constitution for local government, and in fact, that's one of the provisions that's stated in the charter is that this was enacted for the government of Carson City, akin to the United States Constitution being enacted for the government of all of its nation, and all of its sovereign states. And what the Nevada Constitution does for the state of Nevada. That's what the city charter does for Carson City as a consolidated municipality. And I agree, it's one of those things where you certainly do run the risk of perhaps unnecessary changes, which come with it unintended consequences when you do open it up too much for revision. Certainly that's not precluded, which is why it's available every couple of years, but I do agree with your sentiment on that.
Right. Any additional questions or comments on this item? If not, then I would accept a motion. The bill number is 111.
I move to accept the business impact statement as prepared and introduced on first reading. Bill number 111, an ordinance revising certain qualification criteria for the office of supervisor on the Board of Supervisors in accordance with the qualification requirements established by the Carson City Charter.
We have a motion and a second. Any additional discussion? Hearing and seeing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed, nay. The vote is 4-0. Thank you. We'll move on to item, yes, we'll take a not so quick break. We will recess for 9 minutes. We'll be back at 3:10.
Thank you. Oh, golden.
18A for possible action, discussion and possible action regarding the audit committee's recommendation to approve the completed remediation plans and remove the completed findings from the audit findings tracking summary report. Sherry.
Thank you. So Sherry Ruxel, CFO for the record. So the staff has addressed several of these recommendations. By the internal auditor has validated them in some cases, and the audit committee has recommended them for closure. There are quite a few of them. So the 18 external audit findings, I'd like to close that completely. The 19 external audit findings, I'd like to close that completely. The capital projects, that's been sitting out there for quite some time, finally done. I'd like to close that completely. The cash handling audit is actually relatively new, but there are most of the items have been addressed in that, items 1 through 9, 12 through 15, and 19 and 20. So I'd like to close those items. Social media, we've done a few of those items, items 1 and 2 and 9, and we're still working on the rest of them. Human resources, that has, I think, 4 items, and they're all completed, so I'd like to close that if possible. If you want to go into detail, we can, but let me know how much you want, because there's quite a few of these to go through.
Does anybody have any questions?
Seen him several times.
You're out the hook.
All right.
I'll take a motion.
I move to accept the audit committee's recommendation and to approve the completed remediation plans and remove the completed findings as presented in the audit findings tracking summary report.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say nay. Motion passes 4-0. Moving right along, we're on agenda item 18A for possible action, discussion and possible, B, bravo. For possible action, discussion and possible action regarding the fiscal year 2021 audit work program and audit services recommended to be performed by the city's retained internal auditor, Eide Bailey LLP, for an amount of $108,500 plus a contingency amount of $1,500 for a total not to exceed amount of $110,000. And I believe we have a disclosure on this item from Lori.
Yes, thank you. NRS 281A-420 requires me to disclose a conflict of interest and abstain from voting when I have a disqualifying conflict. My son works for Eide Bailey. I previously abstained from voting on the award of the contract to Eide Bailey because I believed that the independence of judgment of a reasonable person in my position could be materially affected by my relationship with my son, who, although he does not have any direct involvement in the Carson City audits, could in general be impacted as an employee by the awarding of the contracts to his firm. Here, however, the contract has already been awarded, and the item before us now only involves giving the direction to the internal auditor by the board as a whole for purposes of proceeding with certain audit projects that have been recommended. Because the giving of procedural directions is a routine function and does not materially affect the independence of my judgment based on my relationship with my son, and also because NRS 281A-420 requires abstention only in clear cases, I do not have a disqualifying conflict and will be voting on this matter.
All right, Jerry.
Thank you. So this is for next year's internal audit program. We bring this to the internal audit committee has recommended these procedures. And so we bring this to you to get that motion passed. This fiscal year 21 will be the last year of the Eide Bailey contract, so we're most likely going to go out for an SOQ in the winter, spring timeframe. And I wanted to point out too that the 1,500 contingency is just what was not talked about with the internal auditor or the internal audit committee. They did award or recommend awarding the projects that added up to 108,500, but the budget is 110,000 for that line item. So if something comes along that they want validated or looked at, that 1,500, we were going to let them choose where to spend that money.
Questions of Sherry?
Yeah, I have a quick question on the internal audit actual versus budget 1920. Can you help me understand, since they did originally provide, sort of an original budget and a blended rate, if they budgeted hours at 100 and their actual hours were less than the budgeted hours, why would the dollar amount be more?
You looking at
Well, I'm on
last
page
year's?
742 of my packet.
So last year's, the
Yes.
1920?
So as an example, let's use social media audit. They budgeted originally 100 hours at a budgeted amount of 11,750. They spent 99 hours, but it cost $8,000 over budget.
So it's the level of employee that they needed on that project. So they couldn't send out a brand new staff person to do the social media audit. They needed somebody with more experience.
And so they wouldn't have known that up front. You're saying?
I'm saying it wasn't budgeted up front.
So based on that, then how accurate is the 2021 estimate?
Well, between 19 and 20, we had partner change, or partner change from, in Eide Bailey.
Yeah.
We have the same partner now recommending this budget after seeing all of the budget issues. So I think it's much more reasonable.
Okay, thank you.
And just as a comment, we didn't pay them, they wrote off the differential. We did not pay them increase, just so that you're aware. What they did is provided,
They
if
donated
I
the
recall
service.
at the meeting, they brought forth, here's what we really did as a budget to actual.
I
but-
did include that in your packet.
Right, but
What-
we
yeah.
only actually paid what was,
Okay, well, that's good to know.
Authorized.
You
Right,
didn't
they
put that
did
in my
call-
packet, you said?
No, I did put it in your packet. It's the last page, the 1920 you're talking about.
Yeah, I
The
see
last
that.
column says donated services, so we didn't pay for that, the donated services. We
Okay.
paid the
So
154.
the donated services amount is equal to the total amount of overage, even though they may not have donated in a given category.
That's right.
Okay.
So my question on this, Sherry, is, what I'm trying to get to is the tail wagging the dog or the dog wagging the tail? So are we budgeting an amount of dollars in this line item, and then they're tailoring an audit program to that dollar amount? Or are they coming in with recommended audits and costs, and we're making a recommended budget allowance to cover what they consider high priority audits?
So they do a risk assessment, so they do come in with some knowledge of what we need, but then the audit committee also makes recommendations on what they would like. So the audit committee and the auditor kind of work together to come up with an audit plan. The audit committee does come in, or the auditor, comes in with recommended budgets and hours for projects. And then it's discussed, it's actually discussed, I believe in March or April, we discuss projects that we think we want to move forward with in '21. And then May or June is when we actually bring forward the cost and the budget for those programs. And then it's determined how much we can fit into the $110,000 budget.
So the fleet audit would be a repeat audit, because we've already done that audit.
We did it in 2014.
Right. So do they, as part of the risk analysis, do they do a comparison of the priority of tackling an item like fleet for the second time because of the time frame that it's been since the first audit versus another area of city governance that may not have been audited yet?
They look at a lot of different things. They look at management turnover. They look at obviously the length of time it's been since the previous audit, the number of findings in the previous audit, and if they want to revisit that because there were a lot of findings. They look at a lot of different things in their risk assessment to determine where they think the need is.
And then my final question would be, do we get to a point where we reduce the amount that we spend on these internal audits because our systems are efficient and have kind of passed muster for an extended period of time? Like, do we ever actually
Wow,
get
it
to
would
that
be
point?
amazing if we could get there because it does add work to, all the directors. But unfortunately, there's always turnover, there's always change in management.
That's what I thought.
Every 3 to 5 years, they want to look at payroll and AP because those are high-risk areas. Make sure the controls are still in place, they're not falling off, So it's about every 3 to 5 years that they do try to rotate things through.
And then accounting standards change as well.
Yes, accounting standards, right.
Stacy?
Yeah, I suppose that new risks become obvious, kind of for Lori and for you, Sherry, since you have experience, Lori, in the audit committee, do we still feel as though contracting out for this service is a better value than having an internal auditor as a city employee that works directly for the board, like we've had in the past? Do we still feel that this is the best route to go? I mean, we're in a contract now, so it's not a decision for today, but I'm just wondering in general.
So I know that the audit committee had an extensive discussion on kind of like the seat, where does it belong? And so one of the issues was to ensure that it did not report to the city manager, because that was the one side looking at the other, so for an internal position. And so how difficult, like you said, so an internal position, the discussion was at the audit committee, as long as it doesn't report to the city manager. It could report directly to the Board of Supervisors or to the mayor, but it should not report to the city manager. I think that the audit committee has felt very comfortable that we got broader coverage in a year that an internal auditor probably could only, as a body of one, is going to do far less auditing than what any firm, not just Eide Bailey, can send 5 or 6 expert areas, which is what happened in the social media. They, I believe, went to a different office and said, let's bring our actual subject matter expert in that audit area. So for that reason, I think the audit committee felt very comfortable with outside auditors because we get areas of expertise that you can't get in a single auditor.
Yeah, it's the same thing with the IT volatility. They're going to have to pull from a different source within their firm, but we're going to get them for the price of our contract. So I think it would be very hard to hire one person at $110,000 that would have all of this knowledge.
Yeah, okay, good, thank you.
Oh, and just as a comment, I'll add on to something that Brad indicated or asked earlier. We actually had more choices than these. So the auditor did bring, based on the whole matrix of the risk assessment, and then the audit committee pared it down from, we have $110,000 to work with. What is the best combination to audit this year based on that? Did we cut out 2 programs this time or something, if I recall?
I think it's on the 4th page.
Yeah.
Yeah,
but
we cut
yes,
out budget
you're
monitoring,
correct that
investments. Yeah.
more things come out, but we do keep it within the dollar of the budget instead of picking them all, even though
Yeah,
the
and
risk
so-
assessment.
Looks like 4.
That's
Page
very,
4.
very true. And the reason that we cut out these things is because there's a good system already. Like our investments are outsourced.
Right.
So there's not a lot of room for fraud or that we're going to make a mistake. Budget monitoring, our system kind of does that for us for the most part. And you guys see our budgets very often. They go to departments head. They're very public. So again, not a lot of risk.
All right. Any additional questions? Seeing none, would somebody like to make a motion?
I move to direct Eide Bailey LLP to proceed with the fiscal year 2021 audit work program as discussed.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed say nay. The motion passes 4-0. We're now going to open up discussion on items 18C and D. Before we do that, I have an explanation on how these items are going to work. The mayor is not here today. We have 2 members of the board that will be reading disclosures and abstaining. So we will only have 2 members of the board that take action on this next item, and the quorum will be reduced to 3 people on this item. If perchance the 2 participating members tie on a motion, then we will continue that item to the next meeting when we have hopefully more members, meaning that the mayor would be back. So Stacy, if you would like to read your disclosure.
And we're just doing 18C first, correct?
Yes, we're going to, we'll both read our disclosures for each item.
Okay. NRS 281A-420 requires me to disclose a conflict of interest and abstain from voting when I have a disqualifying conflict. In my private commitment, I am employed by Nevada Health Centers, a nonprofit organization. This agenda item concerns proposed allocations of CARES Act money from Carson City to various nonprofit organizations, including Nevada Health Centers. Because of my employer-employee relationship with Nevada Health Centers, I have a disqualifying conflict and will not be voting on this matter.
NRS 281A.420 requires me to disclose a conflict of interest and abstain from voting when I have a disqualifying conflict. This agenda item concerns proposed allocations of CARES Act money from Carson City to various nonprofit organizations, including the Boys and Girls Club. My domestic partner is a member of the board of directors for the Boys and Girls Club, and although I am not employed by or occupy a position with the club, I have provided assistance on some matters. Because I have a commitment in a private capacity based on my relationship with my partner, I have a disqualifying conflict and will not be voting on this matter. However, I will retain possession of the gavel. I will not be actively participating in the discussion or voting on this matter, but I will call for the vote when we get to that. So, this is item 18C for possible action, discussion and possible action regarding the allocation of $790,469 to local nonprofit organizations from the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security CARES Act. Sherry.
Thank you. I need to make a quick correction. There were actually 17 grant applications. Thank you, Mayor Bagwell, or Mayor-elect Bagwell. And 2 of the programs were not considered because they were not Carson City nonprofits. So that is where the 15 local nonprofits came from, and then that was $1,357,000 in total applications. The city management team that met and reviewed all the applications is recommending an award of $790,469. That leaves, out of the $1 million that was allocated to nonprofits, it does leave the potential for a second round of awards. Or the board we can talk about later what we want to do with the extra dollars. The only reason we disallowed requests on funding was they did not comply with the CARES Act, or they were for revenue replacement, which, in being fair and consistent with all entities, we were not allowing, per the direction of this board.
Questions for Sherry?
So in general, when I actually did read the applications on these, and one of the things I noticed, and it's just a question of distinction here, that they were asking for PPE. And so we had discussed, but I'd still like to put it on the record, that we have another item that we have $1 million in PPE purchases for businesses. So the question for me is, why should we fund it via this method instead of, except for the one, Varn was a reimbursement, so it was stuff they already purchased. But why the new stuff, they wouldn't just go to Public Works and obtain it just like all the other businesses that might need cleaning supplies and masks and of that nature. And so if you could just put that on the record.
Okay. It's been a while since I read through these applications. I think we read through them on August 10th, but I remember seeing quite a few reimbursements. I don't think it was just one. There were several that weren't reimbursed and then asked for the rest of the year, because we did ask them to give us expenses from March 1st to December 30th, the period of the funding. So if that was the case, they were asking for some reimbursement and some going forward, we just let it go because we figured they had stuff that they like. They've already purchased it. We let it go and allowed the grant for the PPE.
So then may I continue? Yes? Okay. So then we would put the ones that had ongoing in theirs on the list so that they didn't go and obtain it from Public Works.
Yes.
Again, I'd just like to clarify for everyone, if you're taking it this way, then submit your receipts and let's not have a mix and start the problem. And then I just wanted to validate that all of these will actually be getting like a grant award, that they're subject to any of the federal requirements. If they're found to be in non-compliance or one of these expenses is determined
Yep,
not
we
to
have
be
the-
eligible for CARES, they'll have to refund it.
Yep, we are doing this program on a reimbursement basis, so we will see all the invoices before we pay them. They're getting a memorandum of understanding, just like we give to CDBG, which tells them that they've got to comply with federal rules and laws, and we'll do our part if they do their part. So it's definitely, we did very much mimic the CDBG program, just so we didn't have to recreate the wheel. We had such a short time frame to put this together that starting from scratch would have been impossible, so.
A statement of fact, Dan?
A statement of fact, yes, so long as that statement of fact is not intended to persuade or dissuade, the approach, of this board in making this decision.
It's not. The statement of fact is just that a lot of organizations who use PPE have it set up through suppliers to do automatic shipments through the course of their period of time, through the course of their fiscal year, if you will. So in the instances, as you described, it's already going to be coming into them automatically.
Thank you. The point for me was they're not going to go to the Public Works under our other PPE section. They would be barred from getting it there if their application covered it. And I forgot one other thing. Yes, you're going to do, and then I think the other one is actually, and the difference one I think I'll save of the difference of the money, I'll save for the next item of a potential use. So thank you.
You have any questions, John?
No questions, but good job.
Then I would ask for a motion.
I move to approve the award to local nonprofits as proposed.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
So the vote is 2-0 to approve, 1 absent, 2 abstentions. We're now on agenda item 18D for possible action, discussion and possible action regarding the final plan of expenditure for amount of $10,211,415 that the state of Nevada has granted to Carson City through the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security CARES Act. And this item will follow the same guidelines and disclosures as the previous item. So Stacy, if you would like to read your disclosure again, please.
I'd love to. NRS 281A.420 requires me to disclose a conflict of interest and abstain from voting when I have a disqualifying conflict. In my private commitment, I am employed by Nevada Health Centers, a nonprofit organization. This agenda item concerns proposed allocations of CARES Act money from Carson City to various nonprofit organizations, including Nevada Health Centers. Because of my employer-employee relationship with Nevada Health Centers, I have a disqualifying conflict and will not be voting on this matter.
NRS 281A.420 requires me to disclose a conflict of interest and abstain from voting when I have a disqualifying conflict. This agenda item concerns proposed allocations of CARES Act money from Carson City to various nonprofit organizations, including the Boys and Girls Club. My domestic partner is a member of the Board of Directors for the Boys and Girls Club, and although I am not employed by or occupy a position with the club, I have provided assistance on some matters. Because I have a commitment in a private capacity based on my relationship with my partner, I have a disqualifying conflict and will not be voting on this matter. But as in the previous item, I will retain the gavel and I will not actively participate in the discussion or in voting. So Sherry.
Thank you. So this is the final plan of expenditure for our $10.2 million from the state of Nevada that initially came from the feds. And the only change I made to the plan from the preliminary plan was adding in the nonprofits and then adding in some language as to how we're distributing and monitoring the nonprofits. The document could only be 4 pages. I think I used about every single character I could and kept it within 4 pages. So this plan does have to go to the state by September 1st in order to receive our second half of the funding. If we don't make it by September 1st, we can just do it from, get our money from the state on a reimbursement type basis. However, then we don't earn the interest on the money. So I would prefer to get it up front and earn the interest, if possible.
Questions for Sherry?
So this morning, we approved and talked about the plan for the Sierra room and the options and everything that we picked. When I'm looking, 752 of our packet, I see a line for plexiglass and a line for information technology. Where is all of the stuff at the Sierra room, the move over to the theater? Where are those dollars captured?
So the entire project for this room is in the plexiglass projects. I should probably retitle that social distancing projects instead of plexiglass projects. It started out with plexiglass, but then we decided to remodel this whole room for social distancing. The IT needs is basically work from home, all the WebEx. There's a lot of different IT needs citywide that have come about because of COVID. So the electronics in this room are definitely under the plexiglass projects.
And it includes all options in there. We have
Yes.
enough.
Yes.
Okay.
I believe it was 186 that we set aside for electronics in this room and then temporarily using the theater.
Okay. I just want to make sure that sufficient is in there, and maybe I'll handle it within a motion that you can take one last retitle and look of the math, just to make sure all the money's in the right buckets, so that
I
we
did
can-
this morning. I was watching
Oh, okay.
the meeting when that item came up, and I did take a peek, and I made sure that 784 or 500 includes the money for the IT portion, and it's 186,
Okay.
which includes this room and the theater.
And the
electronics.
monitors.
And the monitors,
additional
yes, the 2
options.
additional options, yeah.
Okay, great. But I would concur that I'd like to see it changed to the social distancing,
Yeah.
since it's not just plexiglass.
Agreed, I made a note.
And then on the not yet allocated section of this, I'll find that great if they'll approve a plan without an allocation, because they wanted us to give money back if we weren't going to spend it all. So one of my questions there, if that label, and I'm understanding potentially inadvertently, we left out any Carson City Charter School for applications. So potentially, we could write there, not yet allocated, local charter schools and nonprofits for the difference, because we had originally done $1 million for the nonprofits, and that 209,531 is the differential, but I'd like to give our charter schools an opportunity to apply, so we could go out this next month with that.
That did recently
Additional
come to
round,
my
but-
attention, yeah.
Yeah,
that
I
did-
think
the
we
charter schools
inadvertently
did-
left somebody
yeah.
off. Again, not on purpose, we just thought of school district and didn't go to the charter. So instead of not yet allocated to charter schools / nonprofits,
Okay,
that we're intending on spending it is what I want to,
yeah, definitely,
yeah, that's what I want to drive home there.
definitely.
Okay, perfect. That's my questions or comments.
John? All right, somebody like to make a motion?
Sure. Backwards. I move to approve the final plan of expenditure with a change from plexiglass description to social distancing in Carson City, and that the not yet allocated will indicate for charter schools and nonprofits.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
Yeah, I'd just like to say I'm going to reference my previous comments on the work that's being done out of this for the Sierra Room and the theater, because as I said earlier, we have to have public input, and we are having a little problem with it right now, and that will help. Thank you.
Any additional comments? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
You want to retract that?
Yes, I do retract.
Okay, all right. So the vote is,
I'd retract both ayes.
it is approved 2-0, 1 absent, 2 abstentions.
Thank you.
I'm glad you liked my motion. Habit.
All right. Thank you, Sherry. We are now on agenda item 19A for discussion only. Discussion and presentation on the intended use of the epidemiology laboratory capacity grant in the amount of $3,149,971 received by the Carson City Health and Human Services Department from the State of Nevada Department of Public and Behavioral Health, originating from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, ELC, for infectious disease program for the grant period of January 20th, 2020 through November 17, 2022. Nikki.
Good afternoon, Nikki Aker, Director of Carson City Health and Human Services, for the record. So the reason that this is for discussion and presentation only is we automatically receive these funds because we currently have the ELC, or the epidemiology and laboratory capacity grant, and we've had it for a number of years. So this grant is going to be used for personnel, including what we did right into this grant is additional IT person. So we have been utilizing IT services very heavily lately, trying to get infrastructure in place, and we're with using the inputting testing information, trying to get the testing results out to individuals, and so that is the reason that we did include an IT support person. It will also be for rental space for our disease investigators or contact tracers. I use those terms the same way, and our monitors. And then a portion of the operating expenses for testing, surveillance, monitoring, and investigation of the cases. This grant does not require a match. And I did include with the grant document, I included a funding map so you could see how we're leveraging different funding. We're utilizing a number of different grants and a number of different opportunities to fund individuals for our response. You'll also see that there's additional recruiting that's going on for the response. So I will take any questions.
Do we have any questions for Nikki? Go ahead, Lori.
So, Nikki, I want to tell you how much I appreciate the staff funding map. I just think in the health department, to begin with, that it's imperative. I think it tells a different picture than you get from the normal budget processes. And so I just want to commend you for taking the time. I know I've been kind of like bugging you for it, but I really, really want to tell you how much it helps. And you might want to consider looking at something like that, even in your budget, as one of your backup things that lists all your positions, and that it really drives home that this guy's 1/3 of that and 2/3 of, anyway, thank you. I just want to.
You're welcome. And I kind of needed it to keep track of where I'm at. Because there's a lot of moving parts, so. Thank you. So thank you, Lori.
Stacy or John, any questions? All right. That's it. You're off the hook.
Okay.
Okay. We are now on agenda item 20A Alpha for possible action, discussion and possible action regarding directives and recommendations concerning Carson City departmental and staff functions in Carson City as a consolidated municipality in relation to the exercise of emergency powers pursuant to NRS Chapters 244 and 414 and CCMC Chapter 6.02 for the purpose of ensuring the health, safety, and welfare in Carson City in response to the global coronavirus pandemic. Nancy, take it away.
I just have one thing under this item, and then I'll turn it over to the experts at health. So just in a couple of weeks, we should have our PPE, hand sanitizer, and the cleaning supplies ready for distribution to the businesses. That's the $1 million that's on Sherry's plan. We're developing a request form that will be online for businesses to fill out. And then I believe the idea is to deliver it to the businesses. And so we'll be maintaining an inventory of all the supplies, plus we'll have a note of the usage by the different businesses, and so we can keep track of all that. That's all I had.
Any questions for Nancy? All right, then we'll come back to Nikki.
Again, Nikki Aker, Director, Carson City Health and Human Services, for the record. So a couple of things that I wanted to bring to your attention. I was on a meeting this morning and got some information from that. COVID-19 is now the third leading cause of death in Nevada. And so we're beginning to see, and I'm talking statewide now, we're beginning to see a downward trend and a disease stabilization, although right now we're not seeing a decrease in the number of deaths, and that's because of the lag time. So they're about 5 weeks behind on that.
So Nikki, can I ask you a question? The first two statements you made, the first one was COVID is now the third leading cause of death, and then you went right into the number of cases are coming down and the death rate is dropping. So can you kind of fill in the blank there?
I'm not saying that the death rate is dropping. I said there's no decline in the number of deaths at this time because there's a 5 week lag time. So they're looking at the number of total deaths compared to all the other diseases, and that's where COVID is at this point, is the third leading.
And what are the top two?
You know, I didn't look into that. I was just reporting on this meeting. I would say, heart disease has got to be right up there. And
Heart disease and cancer is what I read.
is it heart disease and cancer? So.
Okay. All right. Standard two. Yeah. All right. Thank you. Keep going.
And then I wanted to update you what was going on as far as office space in that. So the office space for the disease investigators and the monitors, it's almost ready for occupancy. That's going to be at 1050 East William Street, so right across the street in the white buildings. Next week is our target date for that. And then we're continuing to work on the space that's been donated by Parks and Rec for the call center, and I'm working on getting that done. I just want to let you know that facilities and IT have been extremely helpful and responsive through this response and this transition. So I thought that was important for you all to know. So like I reported this morning, we're going to be doing testing and flu shots starting September and October. And I also wanted to highlight, I was alerted about a study that Duke University did about masks. And what they are saying is the garters that individuals are wearing, they actually do not protect and they actually could be harmful.
What are garters?
Garters are those thin,
Gators.
gators,
Okay.
sorry, gators.
Garters in my mind go in a different part of the body.
Gators. Garters will not help either.
I'm pretty sure a garter around my mouth would not work.
Okay.
For this.
Seeing if you all are awake, I guess. Gators. So anyway, those gators can actually be harmful, and the reason being that it's thin material, porous material, that can actually break up the droplets of the respiratory droplet and break it into smaller pieces, which they can travel further. So, and that was a study done by Duke University. So our cloth masks are still what need to be worn, or surgical masks. And what they did say is cloth masks, like a 2-ply, and that you can't see through when you put it up to the light. So now let Jeannie give you all the stats, and does it pass? Oh, okay.
I do. So I'm getting a lot of questions and maybe a little inconsistency throughout the food and beverage industry in Carson City. So the face shield that is for employees is not approved, correct? Am I
Correct, it's not.
I think it's important that we get that on the record because it doesn't impact the visitor to the establishment, but the employee must have the one that covers a nose and.
Yeah,
I
and let me
would
just
like that-
clarify, a
Thank you.
face shield only.
Right.
So if they've got a face shield and a mask, then that would be approved. Yeah, but the mask needs to. Yeah,
It's important, again, so all the Carson City businesses can stay open and not have issues with OSHA. I think there just was some misunderstanding there, and it's caused a little bit of ripple, but if we can just get that and help those businesses understand.
sure, thank you.
Thank you. Piggybacking on Brad's question, this meeting this morning where you talked about the third largest, I'm much more interested in a perspective that relates things. And so I'm interested in, what Nevada's per capita death rate is in relationship to other states, and what our Carson City, which we only have 15 in the 4-county area, what our per capita. I mean, I think we're killing it, and I want to compliment people, and I'll get to compliment myself in the course because I voted for an ordinance, but at the time, I had to open things up. But at the time, I was really concerned and said so, that we might be asking for trouble. So the whole city deserves, and you guys deserve, a lot of credit, and our citizens deserve a lot of credit because we're pretty much killing it in regards to other people. So no hurry, just the next meeting or something. Don't put it at the top of your list, but I'd like to have it put in that context. As I've said before, I'm really angry with my former colleagues in the news media because they're just not giving perspective on this thing. And that's the way
Absolutely.
you get perspective. You got to have a benchmark. You got to have a way to look at these things that has more to do with, we're now the third largest cause of death. It's terrible that people are dying. But, okay? Thanks.
I can do that, and,
Thanks.
yeah, I thought that was very interesting information that came out of that meeting this morning. But I'll compare it. Thank you.
And John, there was a study that I think came out of Johns Hopkins that showed the death rate per 100,000 by state. Yeah, New York and New Jersey were at the top. They were a little over 1,600 deaths per 100,000. Nevada was, I think, 318, so they were down in the 30s somewhere. Yeah. That was recent. That was just last week.
Yeah, but I mean,
Prior data.
Right.
yeah.
Yep.
But I'm more interested, as I say, in this jurisdiction.
Okay. I think you're up, Jeannie.
Good afternoon, Jeannie Freeman for the record. I will give you some information to kind of update you on where we've been the last couple of weeks. You all have had a marathon meeting today, so I will give it to you, and then you can ask me your questions, and I can be your last, almost your last thing today. So across the Quad County area, there were 184 new cases between August 2nd and August 15th. There were 4 hospitalizations and 2 deaths in the Quad County area during that same period. To put it for Carson, Carson had 74 confirmed cases between August 2 and August 15. This accounts to approximately 40% of that Quad County confirmed cases, and it was a 5% increase over the 2-week period before that. So we did see a slight increase in the number of cases for Carson City. The average age for these cases was 37 years old, which was slightly younger than what the Quad County average was. The Quad County average was 40. Since this has began, we're actually seeing the age decrease of the number of people, as far as people who are contracting the disease, we're seeing more and more of those people who are younger who are getting it. 55% of the Carson cases over the last 2 weeks were Hispanic or identified themselves as Hispanic or Latino, and 42% identified as white. This may be an indication that we're seeing a shift in the racial and ethnic distribution from the previous 2 weeks, but it's at one point in time, so we got to look at it for trends as we move forward. The most common exposure for Carson City residents during the 2-week period of August 2nd to August 15th had to do with traveling to another state, in engaging and visiting restaurants and bars, grocery stores, and so forth. 44% of our cases during that 2 weeks had actually had contact to another previous case. So they had found out that somebody had been positive, that they had been in contact with, likely what prompted them to be tested. They had symptoms associated with that contact, and then they ended up being tested and tested positive. Approximately 15% of those who had tested positive in Carson over that 2-week period had traveled to another state, most frequently being California, which makes sense. It's the closest one to us, but we are seeing that we still have a lot of travel, and we know that we have a lot of travel coming into the area still as well. So when we look at stuff, we don't have any particular employer that is creating an issue. Carson City, as has been noted on our social media for the community, has done a very good job. OSHA, with its first initial visits and so forth, has identified Carson as doing very well when it comes to that compliance. We need to make sure that while our businesses are being compliant, that our residents continue to stay compliant as well, so that it continues to support what's going on.
Jeannie, relative to that, or Nikki, I've had a few citizen questions about this, and I know that, one of the reasons why we did so good in our plan and getting off the governor's, naughty list was because we don't have a lot of community spread per se. We can sort of trace it back to, as you said, almost 60% is travel out of state and exposure to a known patient.
Correct.
But the question that comes to me, and I suspect some of the other board members, is would CCHHS issue some kind of statement or warning or level of concern if there were a hotspot associated with a business or a portion of town or something like that? I mean, I think that, from a public health perspective, obviously there are HIPAA issues and there are legality issues and all of those things, but it seems to me from a public health perspective that there's some value in saying, XYZ business has had, 10 cases in the last 7 days, just FYI. And I think about it, I remember back, it's not the same thing, but in essence, it kind of is the same thing. When I first moved here in the early 70s, it was not uncommon to hear radio public service announcements about one house of prostitution or another having an employee who had an STD and broadcasting that on the radio saying, if you visited this location in the past week, you should get tested. So it very similar to that. Anyway.
So throughout this response, we have had some businesses that had multiple cases, and what we do is we work with that business And then also through the contact tracing course, we're looking at all the employees, or we can't capture all the visitors, but we do our best to get who those contacts may be. But so that's how we have been addressing it at this point, is working with that business.
So at what point do you get to where that becomes a public announcement? Are you saying that would never get to that point?
I would think we haven't hit that at all yet, but if we're not getting some assistance from that business, we may go down that road.
I think the public just needs to be assured that and the reason I'm bringing that up is because there are businesses who are complying, and we know all of the Carson City businesses did well in that compliance check, so we can extrapolate that as a whole, our community is doing well. But we also begin now with the new process to reach a level of unfairness if we have a broad statement that says, we're going to have to close all breakfast locations because one breakfast spot, blew it and didn't do what they needed to do, and we didn't get that message out there. So I think from a fairness perspective, it makes sense if there isn't some compliance for us to make a public statement that said, hey, if you went to XYZ between these two dates, you need to be careful.
Right.
Because I think we don't want to do that shotgun approach, because then we're putting ourselves in the same position that we complained about the state doing at the beginning.
Right.
And I really like the approach we have where we're focusing on where those cases are coming from. And so that's why I think it's important that we somewhere in there have a plan to be able to broadcast that information should it reach that level.
Yeah, and if it would reach that level where we're not getting the cooperation from the manager or the business owner, of course, I'm going to bring our legal team into it and Nancy and Stephanie into it too, just to make sure that we're doing things appropriately. But so far, we've had the businesses that we have had cases that we're concerned about, they have been very cooperative with working with us.
Yeah, not to belabor it, I just think it's so tentative with our economy the way it is that we don't just broadly brush all businesses as being bad, because there are a couple that are bad, but I also don't think we should coddle businesses who aren't complying. I think that's critical in keeping our economy going too. So, sorry.
Well, and what's really important to these businesses as well is, if they're not following the appropriate precautions, they lose their workforce and they're not able to operate. And so it's a very important, and we highlight that also.
And I know Dan can hardly wait for you to go with him with one of these issues. I can tell.
Did you have anything else, Jeannie?
I do. In addition, in the last couple of weeks, we've been working very closely with the school districts and the Quad counties, and we've partnered with them. We created a guidance document in collaboration with them. We're holding weekly phone calls with the school districts and answering questions and communicating with their chief nurses and their staff, their superintendents. In addition, the guidance document was distributed to the private schools and charter schools as well, and they're being invited to join in on those weekly calls so that we can continue to be a resource, but that we can also be tackling some of those issues that we're not sure we have until we have them, and we're having that communication with schools and partnering with them ahead of time. We are also collecting data from the schools once they open. They daily, if they have children that are sick or staff that are sick with COVID-like symptoms, or if they have reports of any staff that are coming in or children that have tested positive for COVID, they're going to be reporting that to us. We are going to be hiring through the Nevada State Higher Education System another biostatistician that is going to be strictly dedicated to looking at the issues within schools, to be able to try to identify ahead of time, doing that surveillance of those symptoms, if there might be any issues that are arising putting it in context with what's going on within our communities as another piece of what may be coming forward. We know that the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention want to start collecting data nationwide. It's not necessarily happening. There is no forum. We're doing this ourselves. We're leaning into it. We anticipate that this is something that the governor's committee would want to be seeing as they're moving forward, and we continue to see what may evolve. And so we wanted to take a lead effort in that and start that process and not be trying to catch up. We wanted to be sort of leading that charge and then figuring out what that might look like. So we are doing that. The schools have been very appreciative of us working with them, and that's been a great partnership, which I do anticipate that being even more beneficial in the future moving forward with any other kinds of health issues. And as Nikki mentioned this morning with doing the flu shots, we aren't going to be able to be in the schools this year because they don't want other people coming in. It's a safety matter, and we want to make sure it's a safety and matter for our own staff. And so we are redesigning how we're doing these flu events so that we can provide opportunities in neighborhoods that the schools feed into to provide that convenience to support families and stuff within our communities as well. So we're excited about what we're still able to provide as far as services. We're just modifying how that's happening and still making sure that we're able to get it out there for our folks. That's all I have for you.
Any questions? Well, thank you both.
Thank you.
All right. At this time, we're going to take a short recess so I can confer with the district attorney's office. We'll be back shortly. completed agenda item 20A. We are now going to go back and reopen agenda items 18C and 18D for corrective action. At this time, I would like to note that any disclosures read into the record on these two items stand. And I would also note for the record that the mayor is now present via telephonic means and will be participating on these two items. Dan, if you can please explain the corrective action.
Sure, I'm happy to, and, I want to preface this with an apology. I mean, I'd like to blame this issue that we're faced with on just the heat and the fact that I'm wearing a face mask in the heat, but unfortunately, I think this is something I can chalk up to an oversight on my part and previously advising you as the mayor pro tem on the voting rules for these matters, 18C and 18D. So as I had previously advised, and as you had reiterated on the record earlier today, with respect to the votes that are required to carry a motion successfully, what I had overlooked was a separate provision in state law, which is contained in NRS 241.033. 0355. And I just want to read that subsection 1 in its entirety into the record for absolute clarity here. So subsection 1 of that statute I just referenced specifies that a public body that is required to be composed of elected officials only may not take action by vote unless at least a majority of all the members of the public body vote in favor of the action. For purposes of this subsection, a public body may not count an abstention as a vote in favor of an action. Now, of course, the Board of Supervisors is comprised exclusively of appointed officials, and this provision here, elected officials, and for that reason, the quorum reduction rule and the ethics provisions in Chapter 281A notwithstanding, this board would still only be able to carry a motion successfully upon 3 votes. And for that purpose, we wanted to bring it back for corrective action before this meeting adjourned as we identified that oversight. Once again, I do apologize for that oversight. That's on me. We do have, as the mayor pro tem noted on the record, the mayor who was absent previously today. He is now present via telephonic means. I would ask the mayor pro tem to proceed with another motion and another vote, if that's your pleasure, and then we can proceed from there.
And before we proceed, Dan, I would ask you to read that NRS provision one more time, because I believe I heard you say that you had to have 3 votes in favor, not that you had to have 3 votes. And if that's the case, then the vote has to be 3-0. It cannot be a 2-1 vote. I just want to be clear.
Right, sure. I'm happy to read that again onto the record, subsection 1 of 241.0355. A public body that is required to be composed of elected officials only may not take action by vote unless at least a majority of all the members of the public body vote in favor of the action. For purposes of this subsection, a public body may not count an abstention as a vote in favor of an action.
So then the vote has to be 3-0. Okay. All right. So at this time, I would entertain a new motion on agenda item 18C, noting for the record that the previous disclosures made stand and there will be 2 abstentions on this item.
Okay. I move to approve the award to local nonprofits as proposed.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
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 All right, so the vote is.
I'm Mr. Mayor on the phone, aye.
I got you, Mayor. Thank you. The vote is 3-0 with 2 abstentions. So we're now on agenda item 18D, and I will entertain a motion on 18D.
I move to approve the final plan of expenditure with a change in the word plexiglass under Carson City to social distancing, and the not yet allocated to schools that were not previously in the other, and nonprofits.
Any discussion on this item? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
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 Okay, the vote is 3-0 to approve with 2 abstentions. And once again, I would note that these are corrective actions on agenda items 18C and 18D. Thank you, Mayor, for calling in so that we could take corrective
Let me say-
action on those two.
Let me apologize to our board there. I'm getting better, but I just need some time to rest.
Yep,
Just one thing after another in life, guys.
no
Guys,
problem,
gals.
Mayor. We just
Okay.
have a final public comment and then we'll be done.
All right.
So
I'm
at this,
hanging up. Thanks.
Okay, thanks.
all right, so I will open this up to agenda item 21 for final public comment. Desi, is there anybody on the line for public comment?
There is no final public comment, Mr. Chair.
All right, thank you. So at this time, I will adjourn the meeting. Thank you all.